Hey everyone, we have an awesome panel here. Ultimately, we want to leave you all with ideas and things you can do and walk away with so that you can help affect the women in your lives, the women in your community, to help them as they proceed in achieving their dreams, achieving their goals. So I'll quickly introduce you to all the panelists. I will probably not do justice to everything that they've done and who they are. But I'll do that quickly, and then we'll just start asking questions. I've got a list of questions that I've kind of come up with, but we want this to be interactive. You can raise your hand, like Lea-Ann said, send questions to her, put your questions in the chat. We'll keep an eye on those. We ask that you keep your questions to about 2 or 3 sentences so that we can keep track with them and keep things moving, but that's about it. It's open from here. So let me do intros real quick. First I'll introduce myself. I can do that since I'm talking. At work, I'm the head of brand for Lowe's Innovation Labs. That's Lowe's, the home improvement company. We're a small team, small but mighty team, as they say, that uses emerging technology to, we say, fast forward to the future of home improvement. Before joining the tech realm, I was in the sports industry. I see some of my NASCAR colleagues on here. So between tech and sports, I've been in many, many situations where I'm the only woman in the room. So this is a subject that I'm passionate about. And I have 2 young daughters. One is 3.5, one is 1. And when I think about them and them growing up, I want to make sure that they and all of the kids in Charlotte, all of the kids in our communities have access to the same opportunities that a man would. So yeah, that's me. Let me keep doing intros. So Ashley Maria, you obviously saw her plenty throughout the film. Yep, thank you. I want to mention, we did a little bio beforehand, but she's not only an award-winning director who made that amazing film, she's also a delegate to the UN Commission on the Status of Women, which I think is amazing. That blows my mind. And you have your own IMDb page, which is really cool. So, really and you do too. Yeah. The other famous person that we have here is Maddie, or Madeline. She was in the movie, and she's come a long way since then. She's a student, and not only a student, a senior at UNC Chapel Hill. She's getting her degree in polymer chemistry, and she was an R&D intern for Ecolab most recently. So she was on the Charlotte Robotics team that was featured in the film, in case you missed that. Let's see. Next up, Rashawn, I'm going to point to you. Rashawn Peak is the director of Black Tech Charlotte, which is a program from City Startup Labs. They're focused on creating an ecosystem of Black founded and led high-tech startups. They support a pipeline of talent, innovation, and investor deal flow for entrepreneurs and technologists of color. And Rashawn herself is an ambitious entrepreneur who founded a company that provides entrepreneurs and nonprofit executives with expert executive management on a fractional basis. So that's Rashawn. Christine, we have here too. Christine Nicodemus is the Chief Product Officer for Aperture Education. And before she was in this position, she actually founded Ascend Goals, which is an ed tech company that is focused on creating a generation of students that are empowered to pursue their goals. And her company was acquired by Aperture earlier this year. Her professional expertise has been largely in digital product management, and outside of work, she is the co-founder of the Charlotte Justice Conference. So again, I'm sure I missed some major key points. There we go. That's awesome, Christine. I didn't realize that. Yes, learning. Perfect. So let me just start by opening this up. We all had the opportunity to watch that together. I want to ask everyone, how did you connect with the film?
Yeah, it reminded me of the importance of having high quality, affordable middle school programming for girls and boys in our cities.
I love that, Rashawn. For me, some of the things that really I connected with was just talking about how it's not just men that have gender bias, that women often have bias against other women as well, and talking about the competition that can kind of stir up at times. And honestly, I think some of the people who were, I would perceive to be most limiting to me in my career were often women, I think, feeling competition of some sort. And just the importance of having those sponsors and advocates along the way is just so important.
Maddie, you were in the film. Obviously, you connected with it, but what is it like watching it now? How do you relate to it in different and new ways?
It was really interesting watching it again because I honestly just relate to it even more, like being a senior in college now, because I've just come across more and more like experiences with like self-doubt and being like, oh, I'm not smart enough for this class, especially this year because I'm in a bunch of really difficult STEM classes. And I think it's just really interesting seeing this, like, I don't know how many years later, like 5 years later, and seeing how like true all of it was, even though like I didn't realize it at the time. Because like when I was younger, I don't know, I was just like, yeah, I guess. but now that I'm older, like I'm actually seeing these things in action, and I thought it was really, really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Ashley, thank you for making this movie and for sharing it with us. How are you using it as a tool for change?
Yeah, Lea-Ann and I, we began working on this film back in like 2012, 2013, when people were telling us, don't bite the hand that feeds you, women need to just work harder. That was like the mentality when we started. And, cut to now, people really want to talk about it. And they're going, oh, there is obviously something wrong here. There's something going on. And so we did a lot of test screenings because we wanted it to be a tool that everyone could use. Intentionally, we didn't have bad language so that families could watch it together, companies could watch it. And then we also did test screenings to make sure men felt like they weren't being yelled at. You go, hey, if we want men to be part of the conversation, let's make sure that they feel like they can be engaged. And so that was really important to us. So we then took the film, we actually released it in 2020. So Maddie was like living her life out in the world, and we've been looking at 13-year-old Maddie for like 5 years, so we released it last year, and it's been again screening in with definitely a lot of nonprofits who want to talk about this issue, but really companies have embraced it to bring into their internal DEI initiatives, because like how you all were saying, it kind of brings people kind of together and they can kind of relate. It's also like a second entity, you're not necessarily talking about your own experiences, you're talking about what's on the screen. And so it gets people really digging deeper into these conversations. And, that's all we wanted. We wanted, women to watch it and go, I'm not alone in feeling this way. And then we wanted men, women, mentors, families to watch it and say, okay, it looks like this is still happening, first of all, and we have something to do. And we tried to give people actual action. So yeah, we've been screening all over the world, gratefully, in all the UN languages. Just a lot of people are relating to it and wanting to do something.
Yeah, and I'll just plug in the chat, there's information on if you want to apply to host a screening of your own, you can do that. So there's information there. I agree. I mean, even, we as Queen City Robotics Alliance had a conversation about it after we watched it, and it's a powerful conversation to have, and it does make you think about things in a new way. I think, Rashawn and Christine, you're both leaders and founders in the technology field. Something from the film that I know resonated with me was the idea that women often start out just as ambitious as men, but they gradually lose that ambition. And so looking to you, I'd love to hear from you. How have you gotten to the place of leadership and entrepreneurialism and growth and pushing through? And what has kind of your journey been, and what have you felt like you've overcome, and how have you done that?
Christine, you go first.
Yeah, I feel like I was very encouraged by my parents and my teachers along the way to latch on to math and just really enjoy it along the way. I ended up going on to major in math and business when I went to Wake Forest, and have had some really great mentors along the journey. In terms of obstacles, I think the thing that comes most to mind is just the challenge for women to raise money as an entrepreneur, and perhaps even more so in Charlotte than in other cities. There's many times that I would be invited to have a conversation, but when it came to actually writing the check, there was much more resistance along the way. Mm-hmm. Now, that said, I also recognize that as, a white woman and one that had a pretty great network, I think I had it easy compared to other of my peers, and that I think women of color and those potentially in different socioeconomic statuses, I mean, it just compounds, and the intersectionality between all of these factors is something that needs to be continued to be called out.
My story would be the tip. I would be the stat. So I started off on this trajectory. I'm going to, finish school and skyrocket, and ended up finishing school with a degree in computer information systems, but not able to get a job. So I ended up starting my career off in nonprofit as an admin, which I would, if I could go back, never do, because you are never given the opportunity to grow. And so I just started back in tech this year, and using my entrepreneur skills have made it where I have fought to be in the rooms and be in places since for the last 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. You have made it to an amazing place. So Christine, I want to go back to you because you also have the lens of technology and education. And so I'm curious for those of us who are not in the tech space, like it's easy to think of like in the education space, it's easy to think about being in education and being around young girls as they're growing up and helping them develop these skills and this confidence. But for those of us who are not, have you learned anything about like what that can be that can translate outside of the realm of education? And for those of us who are just, average people living our lives in different industries?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And speaking directly to my industry, I think it's honestly, I think it's a little bit of an easier path given the education and ed tech industry has more women in it than other industries. Right. I think that makes it a little bit easier compared to if I were working in fintech or something like that. Mm-hmm. What I would recommend to people who have young women in their lives is to, when it comes around to the holidays or whenever you're buying gifts for them, like don't go straight to, the doll, like figure out what STEM gifts there are out there, or even not even like specifically STEM gifts, but like play into other interests. I remember when I was 7 and I think I asked my parents for a hatchet, and somehow that was granted to me to go build forts in the woods. And when I was 11, I asked for a lawnmower. I really wanted to start my own business early on, and that was afforded to me. So encouraging women to follow their passions and have fun with, making money or math or whatever it is that they're interested in. Go ahead and encourage that.
I love that. As a mom and someone who's like already thinking about what the heck are we going to get from Santa this year, I really appreciate that. Maddie, so you're still in school for a little while at least. I feel like you have a really unique perspective for now. So from your standpoint, do you have any other ideas for adults that are watching today who want to help shape girls from a young age? Just like help them make sure that they hold on to that ambition that they do have, and that we want.
Yeah. At least for me, I think I do have a lot of like self-doubt when it comes to like authority figures or like professors and teachers. Mm-hmm. So if there's some more action taken into like making spaces like that more welcoming, at least for me, that's something that I've noticed in myself a lot, is like I get really nervous, and it doesn't even matter if the professor is like male identifying or female identifying. Like like having a more like a making sure that your spaces are like welcoming and like they're there for you to like help you, and like they're not there to just be like, oh, you just aren't smart enough to do this or something like that, which like of course like no one's gonna actually like say that, but that's what it definitely feels like sometimes. So I think if we like focus a lot of attention into like at least like acknowledging that there's a lot of like self-doubt that comes from things like that, and putting more efforts into that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I relate to that too. Kaiwen has a question, which I think is a great one. I mean, we've talked about it. They talked about it in the film. It's mentors and sponsors are so important. Getting that social capital, having that example in front of you of someone who's doing it and pushing ahead and giving you advice that you need or giving you the boost of confidence that you might not have yourself. How do we, this may be a question that can help Maddie, but how do we find mentors? What does that look like?
A few things that I'll add in. I think personally, I think I was just kind of like went up and asked people who I looked up to. I think I literally asked them, would you be open to like meeting me every once in a while and being a mentor to me?
Yeah, so you like called it out explicitly.
I do the same thing with me and my husband. We ask other couples to be marriage mentors to us. Like I think this is just like has become a culture of the two of us to regularly go out and ask for mentors. And I think sometimes we assume that isn't a common thing to do. And I don't know how common it is, but at least it is not. If someone came up to me and asked if, I would be willing to meet with them regularly or something like that. It would not come across as asking for a big thing or anything like that. So I would encourage you to do so. And the other thing I would say is for people who are in positions that they could be mentoring other people, I think it's important for them to sometimes initiate the reach out and say, hey, would you want to go and grab coffee sometime and talk about how things are going? I think it can be a two-way street. Yeah,
that's awesome. Jake said the same in chat. Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. If you're able to be a mentor, then do that. Step up and do that. Ashley, from your standpoint, I would say from the movie, you had some amazing people in your industry willing to participate and chat with you and everything, but did that happen organically or was it a function of the film? Or
well, I will say we got the most support when we got out of the film industry. I think there was a lot of women, especially the round table of women up in Seattle with Sarah Bird and Jane and, all these amazing women. We have a deleted scene, so you're hearing it here first, where they talked about how they find mentees. And they said they actually prefer when a mentee has a very specific ask. Like we all are dreading the, can I pick your brain, right? We're all done with that, right? We're good. So like when you say, hey, I'm having an issue with XYZ, do you have maybe 10 minutes to give me? Like that is something that a mentor, like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if you would use the word mentor. Like that could be even scary. You just say, hey, can we have like 10 minutes, quick conversation, go down this path and you're done. And so like what I do, especially in the film industry, I've got my collection of people that I know I can go to this person with this kind of question. I know I can go to that person, and mentor doesn't necessarily have to be someone older. It can be somebody your age or even younger. It's just somebody who will give you 10 minutes because you also are doing that the relationship backwards, like back and forth. You both help each other. And then another thing that really is beneficial to young girls, young women, is to be that role model. And so like what Jake and a few other people have said is that, when you show up as the mentor, when you give your time, you're setting by example. What you hope those young girls and those young boys see when they look at this field. So I think it is so important to, once you feel like you have established, a sense of self in your tech world, then you turn around and start teaching others. That's really important. And that's what I've done. I started to see myself become the mentor, and I was like, oh, it's weird, but it's happening. And it's pretty fun. And Maddie, you might have seen it. Have you seen that yet? Have you started helping maybe the freshmen that are in your class? Because if they're feeling like, if you're feeling that kind of insecurity, the truth is they're probably feeling it too. And so like now you're in a position to help. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm not in many classes with freshmen right now, so I can't really speak to that very much. But in my a cappella group, we just got a whole bunch of like new people. So, and some of them are STEM majors like me and some of the other people in the group. So I have seen myself like trying to like give tips and being like, you know, it's okay if you don't do as well on this exam for this class or like things like that, like giving pointers on like things that I've gone through. So I've definitely seen myself in that position a little bit.
Ashley, just to build a little bit on the thing that you said about like, and someone named it in the chat, mentor for a moment, which I love. That was some of the best advice I got. The VP on my team is a woman and she is a great example. But she told me at one point that she tends to, if she sees something that someone does really well, then she'll just grab them after and just like ask how they thought to do that and why they did that, and like pick a little bit on that and that. And so it's not like she like has this master, and she may too, but like in many ways she doesn't necessarily have this master plan for, here is what I'm going to learn and the mentor that I'm going to, you know, or the person I'm going to become through a mentorship. It's more just like looking for those opportunistic moments where she can really like identify a time that she saw something happen that she could get better at, and then learning as much as she could about that moment so that she could do the same. And since then I've tried to do that. It's been really useful. There's a question from Lindsay on the topic of knowing, understanding, and asking for your worth. Any recommendations? She says, and this is true, people don't just talk openly about salary.
So one thing that's perhaps right on the nose, which is I think there's pretty darn good resources online these days to, especially if you're in a career that there's a lot of other people doing similar things. You know, Glassdoor or other types of salary comparison type tools out there are pretty useful. And I want to be clear that I'm not equating the two of these things, your worth and your net worth, but I just also want to put a plug out there that I wish women did a lot more or there was a lot more education for women around financial education and being comfortable to do their own finances and understand how to invest, et cetera. I think is also crucial.
I know that I found, and it was a wormhole that I went down, but I found this amazing Google sheet that someone has created that's salaries for women in tech. And they say their title, their company, and they put their salary in there, and they'll add any comments around benefits and things like that. And I'm happy to share it with anyone if you want to get in touch with me after I save it. It always shows up in my Google Drive as like because it's constantly being updated. And sometimes it makes me feel great, and sometimes I'm like, but it's really just wonderful to like have actual factual data that's out there. So what you said, Christine, I think there's so much information there, and being comfortable with just sharing too. If you have relationships with people and you don't mind being open about it.
Ask Rashawn, is there a way that you like, how do you prepare your students, for a career, or what do you do, especially when it comes to mentors too?
We work with high school students a lot with another organization. And so Black Tech Interactive just relaunched in April. So we haven't had any examples, any case studies of how they will negotiate when they start. But we do look at all of the trends and find out what the minimum is and what you should ask for. But it's a struggle even being a nonprofit. So you'll ask for something and they're like, we're a nonprofit, so you can't expect to make that. And so that's why my mission is to make sure that we're getting more women into tech so that they don't have to worry about, oh, I can only make this amount of money because I'm doing something like frontline workers. I say ask for what you are worth, and then if they don't give it to you, be okay with saying no.
Yeah. I will say, being a part of, I have many women's groups in the film industry, and we get together and we actually talk about this kind of thing. So we do it in a safe space, nothing's written down, no emails. And we talk about what we're getting paid, how we're negotiating. We can ask each other for help. We just created these kind of social circles that are great ways for us to reach out immediately and say, hey, listen, I'm having this issue with a client. What do you do? What have you done? And everybody just jumps in to help.
I think too, when we have opportunities and we have relationships with men, asking them and having those conversations with men.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question. There are a lot of people will push back for the subject. So that's not true, yada, yada, yada. Maybe we go around and maybe Gretchen can help us to go around the table, but I think actually probably is most qualified to start speaking about when you go around the showing, the screening of this movie. Do you have anybody say, nah, that's not true?
No. I will say when we did test screenings, we had pushback. If anything, my story got the most pushback. And so we had to really be careful about how we edited it because people were looking for everything I was doing wrong. Oh, it's because Ashley didn't do this, or maybe she talks like this, or maybe maybe she wore this. And I mean, it's just everything, all your worst criticisms of yourself, people are saying out loud, and you're like, oh God, this is horrible. So we had to be very careful not to sway in one direction or the other, or people would just take it and run and go, well, oh, Ashley, obviously her projects weren't that good, obviously. And you're like, well, then what, so I had to go through a lot of self, discovery journey as we were editing this film, because we had that kind of criticism as we were test screening. Luckily, we come out the other side, and I'd say some people think we're going to have the solution to everything, every industry, every market, every country. And we say, no, you have to figure out how you're going to fix your world that you're in, but we're giving you this film so that the reason you're actually thinking about it now is because you just watched this movie. Like we had one person who realized the church was a place where a lot of these biases were getting ingrained. And he's like, what do we do about that? I said, I don't know. But I was like, I don't know. But Rashawn, yeah. But everybody's starting to realize after they watch this film where their biases are coming from. And they're like, what do I do? What do I do? So we try to offer conversations like this so they can start to leak out some of those biases and understand what to actually, just making yourself aware of them can be really scary because you just see them everywhere after a while.
Yeah.
We've been gaslighted. So it's just at this rate, we're just like, it has to be me. So this was a good reminder that it's not me. So.
Have there been times where you've found ways to push through and work around it? Ashley has the benefit of being able to edit and test and
right.
I know,
all I do,
reshape.
All I do is push around. So someone was saying earlier about raising funds. It's like, okay, so I'll just use my own money, whatever. It's not that it's not going to happen. We're still going to do the program. We're still going to do the connection. We're still going to do the mission. But if I have to fund it myself, then that is what it is. It'll just be a smaller scale.
Maddie, what about you? Have you, and even back in your Queen City Robotics days, were there times that you saw this happening and you found ways around?
I think I do. I think I realized that I do put a lot of pressure on myself, and I work around other people a lot. And that's something I realized really recently, even is I just want to keep the peace and I don't want people to dislike me. So I will just take either a bunch of, or so I'll just take a lot of control over things because I don't want people to be like, oh, she's just giving all the jobs to everyone else, even though that's like in like a leadership position, at least, like that's kind of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to delegate, you know, but like, I don't want people to be like, oh, she's just slacking off and not doing anything or
Right.
something like that. So I mean,
relate
I
to
guess that's a
that. I
good
relate to
example.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
My question is, my thinking is around with what I heard is we are putting the bias on ourselves that is us, that we don't get funding, or that's us. I'm not leadership enough, so people criticize me. Does that self-doubt happen a lot? And like we just fear about our worst self is showing up. Is that a unique thing for female because the society raised female that way? Maybe we got guys on the call you can talk about it. Say, no, I don't have that problem. It must be girls. So
I
at
saw
least I won't
Maloney
think so.
unmuted right away. Do you have
Yeah.
something you'd like to say?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay, good. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, that's a good question. And I think it's a combination of both, right? So it's how women are socialized, but the rest of it is just reality of the matter, right? I mean, I've had similar experience, just trying to, so I'm in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. I actually recently started my business. And what we're trying to do is to essentially use data to move the needle forward. And, somewhere along that line, trying to raise funds has been a pretty big issue. And even like on my LinkedIn feed, there's been a pretty big conversation with a lot of people in this space, especially the minoritized women, trying to raise funds. And they're having a really, really difficult time doing that when it seems to be a lot easier for other groups. Now, obviously, these issues are very, very nuanced and very, very complex, right? It's not necessary. I mean, part of it is you're not seen as competent or somebody that's able to execute. That's one factor. But the other factor is just the reality of the fact that the network is not as vast, right? Because, when you come from a group that has traditionally for decades not had a seat at the table, then if I'm looking at people to network with that can sort of multiply my network, I'm going to have perhaps maybe one person to work with, whereas somebody else from a different group, say a white male, may have, the equivalent of 20 people to my one. And then that multiplies to like 40 people and then to 60 people, right? Because you talk to one person, they introduce you to 5 people and so on and so forth. So I think there are lots of issues, but ultimately I do think it's the reality. It does actually happen. And then there's also, just the socialization piece too, where, typically we're not being as assertive. I'm generalizing a lot because I know quite a few women that are very assertive, but in general, we tend to not be. And part of that is just like the fear of the ramifications and how we will be judged harshly, right? Or discredited entirely because we are being assertive. Whereas those, tags are not associated with men. So it's just very complex. And I think even the things I've mentioned is like barely scratching the surface because there's so many other nuance to it.
It's so complex. And there are so many pieces that we talked about in the chat and here that Christine's point that layer on top of each other. I think, many of the people on this call are in Charlotte. The event is hosted by Queen City Robotics. For those of you who are not in Charlotte, Charlotte's known as the Queen City. And the data shows that about 27% of STEM positions in Charlotte are filled by women, which ranks Charlotte in the South as number 9 out of 10, which isn't so great. But, I think that not only considering half of the population is women, there are also other compounding factors in Charlotte where we are not known for, we're one of the worst cities for economic mobility. And we know that that's even harder for people of color. So I guess, what can we do in Charlotte in particular? What is it about Charlotte that might make this a challenge? And Rashawn, maybe I'll point to you, knowing that Black Tech Charlotte is really trying to challenge some of these things and improve.
We live by the premise that if you can't see it, you can't be it. And so until we start really in the middle schools and show that there are adults, show the children that there are adults that look like them in the tech field, and take away some of that fear of math that we've developed. Like, our parents have started off with, I'm not good at math. Like, you didn't even try to do the problem. No, I can't do new math, but I can figure out, some of this basic stuff. And then there's Khan Academy. So making the adults confident enough to be able to support their kids is also a priority. I said that I wanted to try to focus on some of the preschool parents that are in tech but could really benefit from having some tech talent generating that will delete the wealth gap, because if we don't get more families in technology, we will definitely be beyond the 50 out of 50. It will be like we don't exist.
Any other ideas?
Yeah, I was going to add on to a great point there. I was going to add on that. I think in addition to, obviously, it's really, really important to catch and start having these conversations early. But I think the rest of it really is just spreading awareness and gaining engagement, So, I think of recycling, for example. Like, recycling was something that, in Japan was, they started doing that, I think about a century and a half or 2 centuries ago, or something like that. But it's not really something that took off for most of us until sometime in the 70s, right? And that's the kind of shift that needs to happen. I know not everybody, recycles, but for the most part, everybody tries to, or at least is aware that this is something that, it's commonly practiced, something that they should do, something that helps the environment. And I think of, just diversity, inclusiveness. I think of it that way. And I think is that level of grassroots, spreading awareness, having conversation, informing, because a lot of people, it's not really because they're against, they just don't know any better. They're just ignorant, or just, haven't been put in a position to think about it, right? Yeah. People in minoritized groups, probably think about it a lot more because their daily lives are impacted in one form or another. But if you're not, if you're not part of an out group and you're part of an in group, the likelihood of you sort of coming up, with it and thinking of it on your own and exploring and educating yourself is going to be a lot less than it would be for someone that's actually impacted. So
Right. Yeah, I'll say in my own team, we talk about it a lot. We, the women on my team will point out situations where other women maybe were not listened to, or will be very proactive about, oh, I heard a great point that so-and-so made. And then let's talk about, as a group with the men and the women, why that situation happened. And we've become really aware. And it started with one person asking one question, and then it kind of becoming a culture of conversation that we continually have. And I think anyone can do that. You can be the one person who sees something happen that you hope wouldn't happen again. And then you talk about it directly, and from there it can go. Let's see. Maddie, how did robotics help you reach where you are today?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, because while I do think it did help build my confidence, I think it's because I was in a good environment, like a good team environment, because there were other girls with me and girls that I had grown up with it through middle school to be on that team. So I think that's why it helped me build confidence, not necessarily just because I was on robotics, but I think actually being around other women on the team made me a bit more confident. And that's what gave me the opportunity to have leadership roles, which in turn let me know okay, I can actually do big things.
To gain your confidence. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's see. Okay, I'm seeing more questions come in. So what would be your advice for women to work up to the manager and C-level suite to fill the gap up? Those positions tend to be business majors, which is not necessarily a STEM field. That's a great point.
One of the things that's most important to me as a manager is asking the people on my team what their aspirations are and what they're hoping to grow in their professional development. And I think if you're being managed by someone, it's important that is not asking that question. Make sure that they know what your aspirations are. And I think the more transparent about what you're hoping to do, the more opportunities that will arise when those, if your manager doesn't know that you want to become a manager or want to further develop your public speaking skills or something like that, I think it's a loss. And so I think being, putting it out there to your manager, what you're looking to do is really important.
Mm-hmm. In 1 or 2 sentences, to all the panelists, what is one thing that you took away from today's event that you wish everyone would go do? And what would change if everyone went and did that following this? So let's see. Ashley, I'm going to save you for last. Maddie, let's start with you.
I think everyone should go up to someone who they think they look up to or that looks up to them, and just give them words of encouragement. Because even if it's someone you look up to, I think hearing that from someone who just knowing that someone looks up to you, I think is very impactful. And I think that will contribute to just bringing everyone up in general.
Confidence. Yeah. Growth. I love that. That's easy. We can all do that. Rashawn.
Everyone should make a donation to Charlotte Robotics. Queen City.
Thank you. We didn't ask her to do that. But that's awesome. For those of you who aren't aware, QCRA, our goal is to help every child in Charlotte have access to the career of their dreams, basically, in short. And so we give kids access to robotics programs, which are hands-on STEM activities. I'll build on yours, Rashawn. And for those who financially don't think it makes sense, we also need mentors and volunteers. And thank you for this opportunity. We need mentors and volunteers, and you don't have to have a robotics background. You don't have to have an engineering background. The teams are run like true businesses. And so really anyone can volunteer and show kids what's possible and show them what their career could be. So thank you. That's awesome. Christine, what do you think?
I think too many of us are stuck in a worldview of scarcity. And if more people had a worldview of abundance and that there is enough to be shared around and for us to just collaborate with each other more, I think you'd see a lot more startups get funded. You'd see a lot more people be lifted up, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And then Ashley, for you, you've had these conversations everywhere. So I would love to hear from you, not only what you've heard today, but what's the best idea that you've heard throughout all of these conversations as you're taking this globally?
I love that you asked that question, because I was talking with Lea-Ann about it, and we're like, what was one thing we thought was really cool? And we have a good champion of ours in Zambia who hosted a screening back in July as a part of this relay. And she has a disability, a physical disability. And so she goes and she tells people, you cannot make decisions about us without us. Without us at the table. So if you are in an organization and you're saying, gosh, I think we should have more diversity, bring in more diversity to the table to actually talk about how you're supposed to retain those employees. And no, don't just make the one Black woman in charge of your DEI, have her be in charge of so much more. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we loved, and we quote that a lot. It's nothing about us without us.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Well, and I think as a host, probably want to just also respect everybody's time. It's 6 o'clock. So the first thing I want to say is a thank you for our host and the panelists. Thank you for the Pioneer in Skirt Impact Movie Relay. That's how we be able to have this movie to watch. And I watched it a couple times. It have a different feeling every time. So hope we got a chance to host that one more time in the future, again in this community. And for all of you joining us today, we will ask you to fill a post-screening impact survey. Lea-Ann is sharing, will share on the chat. For sure, for you to fill the survey, it will send out as an email as well. I think this is very important because we have to tell the story with the data. If we want to have a bigger impact, we need to get this voice heard. Your feedback will help us to promote the cause. And I'd like to thank you in advance for filling the survey. And we will hang on the call, I think, as long as Ashley allows us, if you have a more question. But I want to just turn out to Ashley to wrap up officially, but we just hang out a little bit longer, Ashley.
Yeah. Yep. So Lea-Ann put in the chat our impact relay survey. It's something that we're working with corporation to get data, like everyone's saying, that's actually going to impact change. Because one thing we've learned with the United Nations is policymakers really take action when they see the numbers. You can tell them stories, but it's the numbers that really makes them put laws in place. So that's something really important to us. We started this impact relay to go around the world, and you too can apply to either be a part of the impact relay or bring the film to your business, your community on your own if you'd like. Pioneersandskirts.com is the way to go. And our next event is December 10th. 10 a.m. It's going to be hosted by the United Nations with the youth leaders and young professionals. Hint, hint, Maddie, you should look into them. Hint, hint. And we'll be posting that registration information soon. So stay in touch with us for all of that. We're excited. That's the day after my birthday, by the way. So if anybody wants to put that on their calendar, you know. And that's our Global Impact Movie Relay. We're very proud. We've been Zambia, Australia, China. We've had an incredible run, Brazil. We're so grateful to everybody here today and for providing your feedback, your input, and with the survey. Thank you.
It's fun to get to chat with the filmmakers themselves. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna shut us down.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.